Commitments are coming in, folks, and based on the rankings and the offer sheet, they're pretty darn good. So Ohio State fans, be happy, and we will wait more coming throughout the summer. In the meantime, we wait for you to leave your comments and questions there in the chat. We appreciate your support here at the Voice of College Football as well. Buckeyes Live, number 219. We got Tony Grudeman right next to me. BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly is the podcast. You need to lock in on that. And the new venture college football playbook right here on YouTube. And then, of course, Steve Hillwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, Big Ten senior writer, senior Big Ten writer. I don't always get the exact wording correct, but Steve's been around a long time and done an amazing job is what that means. Guys, how we doing today?
Good.
Doing great.
Steve, Bryce West is a pretty darn good cornerback, arguably the best in the nation, top 5, best in the Buckeye State, according to 247 Sports. And he is now an Ohio State Buckeye. At least he's made that commitment.
Yeah, and also you think about all the guys from Cleveland, Glenville over the years that, have committed to Ohio State. They're kind of rebuilding that pipeline again after a few down years. At Glenville, they won a state championship this past season at Glenville, their first. So, good times are starting to roll again up there. Listed 5'11", 177. I think he might be a little bit bigger than that. The composite, he is number 49 overall in the composite. But that's kind of driven down. But for some reason, our network, 247 Sports, has him ranked as the number 15 cornerback and number 159 player overall nationally. And I need to put our guys, Alan True and Steve Wiltfong, their feet to the fire and find out, no love for Bryce West. Like what's going on there? Why isn't he ranked a little higher? But every other network's got him in the top 50, obviously, because that's where he is in the composite. So tremendous get for Ohio State. Picked the Buckeyes and was also right there with Michigan. Had just made a visit to Michigan as well before visiting Ohio State. Ohio State really pulled out all the stops on the visit for all these guys. West, Demarion Whitten, the other player there from Glenville as well. But West, he committed to Ohio State. It was in a video that was posted online Friday night. But that video kind of got leaked out ahead of time, and he went official with it, let's just say, then on Saturday. So it is a done deal, finally, and Bryce West helping Ohio State kind of rebuild that cornerback position. Buckeyes still trying to also get Aaron Scott, who's also similarly ranked from Springfield, Ohio, just about 50 miles down the road west of Columbus, trying to get him in the fold as well. So we'll see if they can close the door on Aaron Scott as well.
Steve, it's funny you mentioned that about the disparity in the rankings, because not just with Bryce West, I was going to bring that up at some point anyway, because I noticed this with almost every player. I look at the composite, then I look at 247 Sports, and those are the numbers that I use. And it seems like 247 always has everybody rated like 15 spots lower at their position and 50 spots lower overall. And I think, who's like the top 150 players at 247 Sports? Have they forgotten to clear out the list from last year, or what's the deal going on? Because it seems like that's the deal with everyone.
I can't explain it because I'm not involved in the football ranking protocol with 247 Sports. I think it's like a lot of things, and for this network to be skewed, toward the SEC region, Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Georgia, those players, California, are going to get the top rankings, I guess. I can't really explain it. That's an easy explanation for it right there, but it doesn't explain why Rivals and On3 Sports and ESPN look at the same player, like in this case Bryce West, and all have him up here, whereas 24/7 has him down here. I don't know that Glenville plays the greatest schedule, And I don't know that Bryce West may have spent a lot of time at a lot of the national events, so, maybe they just don't have him ranked up there because they haven't seen him. But they did wade through some pretty good Division II teams on their way to the state championship, and I can't take that away from them. That's one they won on the field, no doubt.
Tony, the Buckeyes get a good one. Unfortunately, he can't suit up this fall.
Well, yeah, that is unfortunate. Personally, I think maybe one of the reasons there's some rankings disparity is because Bryce West will play all over in the secondary. He's not just an outside corner. And so maybe other corners have been rated higher because they are just this outside corner, and you have all of this film, i.e. huddle highlights, to rank these guys off of, where with Bryce West, sometimes he's at corner, sometimes he's in nickel, sometimes he'll just move around because that's what Glenville's defense does. So I wonder if maybe that has something to do with it, but it also definitely goes back to camps. And did you camp at the Rivals camp? No, I camped at the ESPN Under Armour camp. Well, you shouldn't have done that. You should have camped at this camp. And sometimes there are those things that go on. Steve mentioned like the Southeast rankings. I mean, that was always the belief or the conspiracy theory with like Rivals, because they're based in Tennessee, and they would rank the SEC players higher. ESPN obviously would rank the SEC players higher because of their contractual obligations with the SEC. However, I think we also realized that the majority of the nation's best players, like a lot of them, come from the southeastern portion of the United States. So I don't think you can just continue to say there's a conspiracy theory. Although, like back, a decade ago with ESPN, when you would look at who their scouts were and where they were located, they had like 8 in the Southeast and 1 in the Midwest. So, how much can you see if you're the Midwest scout as opposed to what the eight guys in the Southeast were able to, the ground they were able to cover. But Bryce West, I think there might also be this thing where if you're not even sure he's the best corner in the state. So if you're not sure he's the best corner in the state, how good could he be nationally? If you're not the best corner in Ohio, how could you be a top 5 corner nationally? I wonder if there's some of that going on. But, certainly a good get, and a guy that can, in my opinion, end up anywhere in the secondary. And maybe that's also a fault that he could play several spots.
Yeah, I sent Mark a link to the video that Mark Porter, the guy who does videos for us, posted on our site. And, it's going to be, you can do the best you can with it. But this play here, he's returning a punt, I believe, and just runs away from everybody. There'll be most of the plays that are coming up on defense. He is working as, in this case, a run support player, and he sticks his nose in there. Again, he's tracking one down the field. Coming up here, there's another one. He's got to track the play down the field and stop the touchdown. Yeah, he's got the ability. Okay, now you're going to see in the open field coming up, and he is fearless. He is absolutely fearless. This doesn't bother him to come up and stick his nose in and make a play as a run support player. So when I saw these plays, I'm thinking like an Antoine Winfield, which is a long time ago, obviously, at Ohio State, or a Malcolm Jenkins, a guy that comes up and makes plays both in the pass game and in the run game. And that is something that you absolutely cannot teach a player most guys are looking to avoid contact. He's saying we got to get the ball carrier down regardless. Now, the next few plays, it's going to shift, I think, to some passing coverage, and what he does in terms of coverage. Looks like he's got good positioning and good ball awareness. In some of these, it looks like he's the offensive player because he's got more of a play on the ball. I know those are hard to see, with the screen set up the way that it is. But for me, I look at it and again, he is a guy that is going to be an outstanding corner, I think, at Ohio State. I don't think there's much doubt about that.
Really good stuff there. Bryce West, again, a top 5 cornerback in the nation, number 1 rated player in the state of Ohio, a Buckeye. And at last glance, I saw that Ohio State edged ahead of Georgia. Again, don't necessarily take this to the bank. We're months and months and months and months away. But in regards to average player ranking, currently, I believe, number 1 in the country. But certainly, Ohio State fans feel good about the recruiting efforts, which also included Tony Demarion Whitten, the tight end.
Tight end out of Glenville, and number 19 tight end in the nation, according to the composite. More of a receiver at this point, listed at 6'4", 215. Glenville came to the Columbus area last year, and I watched him, not knowing who he was. I was there to watch Bryce West, but he makes plays downfield. He's a red zone target, and I think at the Ohio State camp, he ran about a 4.65, so he can move, and they were impressed by that. But a good get for them. It's the second tight end in the class. They wanted to. He joins Max LeBlanc, a Canadian by way of Tennessee at the Baylor School in Chattanooga. So another addition for them, keeps that pipeline going. Kentucky thought they had him, apparently, based on the some tweeting from Vince Marrow, their tight ends coach. But and also some people from Kentucky thought that he was headed there. Apparently, they were not aware of the history of Glenville and where the Glenville guys go that Ohio State wants. And this is a guy that Ohio State definitely wanted. It is interesting to me, like the 2 tight ends that they got, 6'4", 222, 6'4", 215. So I think there's some developmental aspects to these guys. But the tight end room at Ohio State right now is pretty deep, and they may only be losing 1 guy after this year in Cade Stover. So there is room and there's time for these guys to develop.
The Aaron Scott battle is being waged in the chat, and Tony, you touched upon that. What are the best indicators out there right now? Are they valid?
Well, I think both schools feel good about where they stand, and both schools feel good about what they have, the brochures that they have laid out for him on the coffee table. And now he'll be deciding at some point in July. I think, as I said, both schools feel good about what they've put forward, but I think both schools are a little concerned because he hasn't committed yet. So there is some concern there that, this is a guy that is really, really, really good. Ohio State can't afford to lose him to Michigan. You don't want to lose your best in-state prospects, and you don't want to lose your best in-state prospects to your mortal enemy. And so there's definitely some concern there. I do think I have seen some Michigan recruiting people talking about would Aaron Scott have the guts and the fortitude to choose Michigan over Ohio, which I think is a little bizarre, but it's going to be it should be decided within the next 30 days or so, and somebody's going to be very, very disappointed, and then somebody else is going to be doing a whole lot of dunking on the other fan base.
Yeah, I don't have an inclination either way on Aaron Scott. I know Michigan has fought really hard, and you have to kind of tip your cap to Michigan. I think that their staff, since about 2 or 3 years ago, when Jim Harbaugh kind of turned that corner and realized that his methods of doing things weren't getting it done, I think he realized he was going to be out of a job, even as he was pushing for every open NFL job and nobody was taking him, that if he didn't change the way that he was doing things, that, they were just going to continue to languish. And he got some fresh blood on that coaching staff, and they're fighting hard for every kid they can get, and that includes Aaron Scott. So, the battle's been joined. Let's just put it that way. And Ohio State's got to rise to the occasion once again, and we'll see. I think Tim Walton, I think the jury was out on him as a recruiter. I think Bryce West, landing him was a good first step, and now we'll see if with Aaron Scott, if they can close that one. They're getting Miles Lockhart, another defensive back who's outstanding as well. So they're doing some pretty good things there in the secondary, he and Perry Eliano, and we'll see if they can carry it over here and add one more.
I will say that all of Rivals and 24/7 and On3 all have their prediction things, the crystal balls and the future casts, and nobody has yet put one on Michigan to land Aaron Scott. And until that happens, you got to lean Ohio State. And now it doesn't mean it won't happen because, like I said, all of these guys can go ahead and start flipping their predictions, but nobody has put one on Michigan yet. No recruiting reporter, no recruiting writer, nobody who follows this has put one in for Michigan yet. So that tells you where everybody thinks he's going, or where those people who have put things in think he's going. And nobody has been so bold enough to think that Michigan is going to land him that they will go ahead and make that prediction. So just something to keep in mind.
Ferris, thank you so much for watching our Big Ten wide receiver rankings video. Folks, check that one out. Might be disgruntled if you're not an Ohio State fan, but that is not a statistics prediction, folks. What that is just me evaluating who I think are the best wide receivers in the Big Ten, meaning if you're Julian Fleming and you step on campus anywhere else, you will probably be the man. You may not get the targets. You may not get the stats because the two other guys, of course, and then also a running game that actually runs the ball more than you think it does, and may even more so this year. So the stats may not be there. I'm not predicting stats. I'm telling you who I believe are the best players at the position. Yes, and Ohio State is loaded. So I've gotten a lot of comments about how biased I am, but for some reason the bias didn't leak into the running backs video. It was just a bias toward the wide receivers that I had.
You know, Mark, I don't know if this will help you out or not, or just send the bias spiraling out of control. But I said the same thing on the Buckeye Weekly podcast yesterday, that Julian Fleming was anywhere else and he would be the number one guy basically. And the reason he's not going to have huge numbers is because of course, of Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka, but you put him somewhere else and he is that guy. And did you have him like ranked third in the Big Ten or something? Is that
number 3?
Yeah. I mean, who are the arguments? It's not Cornelius Johnson, you know, it's not the number 14 Roman Wilson for Michigan. Like who are the other arguments? Tell me, like, who's number 4 on the list that you had?
I had either Jayshon Jones, the Maryland wide receiver.
He's got to stay healthy.
I had him at 4. Or I had Keandre Lambert-Smith. I had them next in line in some order. Chris Audman-Bell's been around a long time, but he's not at that level. Yeah. So I think people get that confused. Yes, the 3 best receivers in the conference could be at one school.
I mean, look at the first. Yeah. Look at and they should be really with Brian Hartline's recruiting, and it probably isn't going to. You know, when will that change? When Ohio State doesn't have the top 3 receivers, maybe in the Big Ten is another question. But when Julian Fleming was at his healthiest last year, the first 5 games he played, he scored 6 touchdowns. Just that's like when he's going well and the offense is going well, that's what he can do.
Yeah, what would be an interesting experiment would be take the 3 that they signed, the 3 top 8 in the nation, and just let them play, and take Fleming, Egbuka, and Harrison off the field for the season, and see how good those 3 are just straight off of the street, off their high school careers. See how they play. They might still have the best room in the conference.
To answer Sue's question, he can play another year with he's got his COVID year that he could do, but he's going to do pretty well at the combine. I think he's fast, he's strong. I think he'll put up enough production to where he won't need to come back, but it will be interesting to see if he wants to come back to be that 70 catch guy, because you won't have Marvin Harrison and Emeka Egbuka there.
Absent of any other newsworthy topics right this second, folks, leave your comments and questions there in the chat. And of course, consider the super chat. We would appreciate that as well. Michael says, well, if you don't have the best quarterback or the best offensive line, so the wide receiver room doesn't matter as much. That is true if those other 2 are the case. Yes, the wide receiver position, I've always said, and it's pretty obvious, this is no visionary statement on my part. It's the most dependent position on either side of the football. However, when those guys are wide open, your quarterback doesn't have to be quite as good. And man, it's just going to be fascinating. I don't know that we're going to go anywhere with this conversation that we haven't gone a number of times until somebody takes a snap in August. But is Kyle McCord just going to keep this thing rolling, or is there just going to be this huge chasm within the Ohio State conveyor belt factory line of great quarterbacks? Or is Devin Brown going to be the starter against Notre Dame because Kyle McCord was beaten out in camp or didn't perform the first 3 weeks?
Man, a lot of variables there, a lot to sort through. I believe McCord's going to be fine. I think it's going to work out. And I think the offensive line's going to work out. And I can't sit here today and definitively say that Josh Simmons is going to be the left tackle. Josh Simmons is going to be the right tackle. Josh Fryer is going to be the left tackle. Tegra Tashbola is going to be the right tackle. Zen Mikulski is going to be the right tackle. We don't know. I mean, you don't know. Justin Fry doesn't know until they get through about 15 practices and figure out who's the most consistent and who's the best. Nobody knows. I mean, it'll just be a guessing game right now. I know that what passed for offensive line play in the spring certainly will not pass for offensive line play when they go up against Wisconsin, Penn State, Notre Dame, or Michigan. I don't think that's going to work. So they've got to get that figured out, get that improved. And, I think it'll take some time, but it is good that they play Indiana, Western Kentucky, and Youngstown State before they have to play Notre Dame. They can work some kinks out at quarterback, work some kinks out on the offensive line, hand the ball off to those running backs, get it out quickly to those wide receivers, and let them create in the interim. Let them do the heavy lifting. And then from there, I think over time, you're going to see the play at quarterback and offensive line continue to improve all season long. So to me, that's how this is going to go. That's what my experience tells me, is that over time, it's going to work out. It's just getting from point A to point B. There's going to be some bad plays in there. It's just a fact of the matter. And we saw it in the spring, and I'm sure we'll see it against Indiana. There's going to be a series that just gets completely wrecked because of a holding penalty or a sack, or, and people will be like, what's wrong with Ohio State? Well, it was just one blip. I think over the course of time, they're going to work it out.
And just going back to a previous comment that Michael made, saying you don't have the best quarterback or offensive line, so the wide receiver room doesn't matter. They don't need the best quarterback or the best offensive line. If we're sticking to your words, second best would be just fine. Third best would be just fine. Fourth best would be just fine, because the rest of the talent will lift that up. And based on what Ohio State has, is there any chance that they don't have a top 5 offensive line in the Big Ten compared to everybody else? I mean, that would seem to be pretty easily done. And Kyle McCord, let's not forget, Ryan Day has had 4 starting quarterbacks in his time at Ohio State, and all 4 over his 6 years, they've been the Big Ten quarterback of the year. So it's a larger leap to expect Kyle McCord to be average than it is to expect him to be great. And that's the history of this offense. That's the history of the receivers. The offensive line is huge, a part of that, and they can make Kyle McCord better, obviously. So I do expect Kyle McCord to be fine. I think if you were to bet on the all Big Ten quarterback, Kyle McCord is a much better value bet than J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy is probably the favorite, and Kyle McCord isn't. But if you're going to put 20 down on on one of those players, the better bet would be McCord, because as we've talked about here in the past, Ohio State's been first team all Big Ten on the quarterback for every year since 2016, and the time they weren't in 2015, they were splitting reps at quarterback. So starting quarterback at Ohio State's going to put up big numbers. What J.J. McCarthy has going for him is the name and the experience, got his team to the playoffs. He makes plays. He's a highlight guy. So that will help, because media voters are distracted, and we love our highlights. So that will help him. But we also love our numbers, and I think that's going to be the Kyle McCord thing. So I do expect him to be very, very good this year. But yeah, the offensive line determines whether he's going to be very good or great, I think. And if you give him time, he'll be great. With less time, the scale goes down a little bit. But I expect Ohio State's offense to, again, it's been a 40-point per game offense ever since Ryan Day has been there. So I don't expect that to change now.
Michael's telling us that Notre Dame has the better quarterback and offensive line, and it's not close. Well, Notre Dame has a quarterback that I have a lot of respect for. I rank him extremely high. I think Sam Hartman's exceptional. However, that we don't know if that statement is true. They have the more experienced quarterback. How many guys had more experience than C.J. Stroud did at this point 2 years ago, and then C.J. Stroud just flew right past him? The offensive line at Notre Dame has obviously been their strength under Brian Kelly, and was not really up to standard last year, but still a good offensive line. When is the last time, guys, that Ohio State had a better defense than an offense? And should we be expecting, of course, there has to be better defensive play against the good opponents, but maybe this is a defensive-driven team to a certain extent. I know that doesn't make sense under Ryan Day and considering the wide receiver room and the skill players, but why can't this defense?
I think ironically, it would be the last year Ryan Day wasn't at Ohio State in 2016 when that defense was really, really good, and they got shut out, and the offense got shut out in the playoffs. And so you bring in Ryan Day to change the offense, which he does. But yeah, the defense is struggling. I don't blame Ryan Day for that. He brought in Jeff Hafley, and that 2019 defense was good enough to beat anybody. And I still think it would have been an incredible matchup to watch against LSU, but I think the defense definitely needs to do their part this year for sure. I'm sure Steve agrees.
Yeah, I'm not ready to say the defense is going to be ahead of the offense just yet at Ohio State. I think that if they put up 45 points a game last year, maybe they'll still put up 38 or 40 this year. I don't look for that to change a whole lot, but defense to get gashed the way that they did, giving up big plays in the season's two biggest games, that's just not acceptable. So any kind of improvement would be certainly welcome. And I think you'll know, watching some of the early games, if they do give up some big plays in those early games, you're like, well, it really hasn't changed that much. But I think the second year under this system is going to look a lot different than it did the first year. I think people were still learning. People were still developing into roles as starters. And the defensive front, to my opinion, didn't play like it was like it needed to at times to keep this team, to keep this team in a good position, so to speak. To put up, they rarely put opponents behind in down a distance, and they rarely put pressure on the opposing quarterback. They usually had all day to sit back there and pick the defense apart. So if they can change those two things and start getting some negative plays and start making some opposing quarterbacks nervous, that would be outstanding. That'd be a great place to start.
I don't know why I'm so amused by this exchange right here. Mike says, is that the same offensive line from Notre Dame that lost to Cal and Marshall last season? And then Christopher Foote says Marshall has national titles. I don't know why I think that's amusing. Probably because Christopher calls into the show and I understand his quote,
when Randy Moss was
reasoning,
roaming
end
the
quote.
earth, maybe. Randy Moss and Chad Pennington were roaming the earth. I don't know. I don't know.
Yes, we can count, maybe go through the rosters and count
Bob
high
Truitt.
school state championships for each roster, and those apply as well. Ferris, thank you so much for the contribution. How often does a 5-star quarterback fail? Well, a lot less than 4-star quarterbacks. That I know.
I saw the question, so I was just looking through, and like the 2020 quarterbacks are still the jury is still out. It's the composite 5 stars with Bryce Young and DJ Uiagalelei. So we'll see how he finishes out his career this year in Oregon State. Like I went to the 2018 was the first one I went to, and that's Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, and JT Daniels. So you're 2 for 3 there. 2017, oh boy, Davis Mills. The scouts liked him. Hunter Johnson transferred from Clemson to Northwestern, back to Clemson. Was never good at any of those places. And Tua Tagovailoa. So can you bat 500 on 3 quarterbacks there? I mean, Davis Mills was pretty good at Stanford, but nobody knows that. Nobody watched him. I'll go to 2016 here, just see what that one is. That's Shea Patterson and Jacob Eason. So you just never know. It's not a 100% thing. It might be bordering on 50% thing. Some other quarterbacks that were 5 stars, I think, in other rankings, KJ Costello, Malik Henry in that same class, 2016, maybe a Felipe Franks in there. Just throwing some names out there that didn't quite pan out. So it's not a sure thing, but it's better than like you said, Mark. It signifies something, but it doesn't necessarily signify everything.
I thought it was going to be higher than that, and I would give JT Daniels a little bit more credit. He was good at USC. He was even better at Georgia. He just, I don't know. He got hurt, obviously, lost his job, and then moves on to West Virginia. And now, inexplicably, at least in my thinking, he's at Rice. But, he could play the position. He could play the position at a top 15 to 20 level in the country.
But in terms of your fan base, you've just landed a 5-star quarterback. He may be able to play, but it might not be your school that he plays at. You might play well, but it'll be somewhere else.
Well,
but that's any quarterback now. Yeah, exactly. That's Quinn Ewers. That's
example.
Shea Patterson started at Ole Miss, went to Michigan.
And Ewers, the jury is out on him. If Texas, somebody, I don't know, on Twitter was like, what do you expect out of Texas? I said the usual, 6 or 7 wins and high expectations, a tremendous fall from grace, questions about the coach, an inexplicable loss to I don't even know
JT Daniels and Rice.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think of who's at the bottom of the Big 12, but they're all kind of middle of the road, so they don't really have a bad football program, I guess. I don't know.
Lose to Vandy in the SEC.
Yeah.
Kentucky.
Yeah. Wait till they get to the SEC and 5-7 looks good, and 4-8 looks good. That they're not ready for that. Every week, no freaking way.
But you know what, Steve, you say that, and I did see. I saw that the Texas got new locker rooms, and we all remember back when Tom Herman got those new locker rooms at Texas, and he was there with a sledgehammer and breaking up the old locker rooms and putting in the new locker rooms, and things went sky high from there. So just imagine what they're going to do now with these new locker rooms from those old locker rooms that were like 5 years old that Tom Herman put in. That's always the first step in building a program and rebuilding a culture. It starts with air conditioned locker rooms for your receiver gloves, I guess.
Do they have the biggest video board still, or it's like a Gazilla-tron was what they called it or something. And I think it was there in 2007 when they unveiled it, and it was 2006. It was huge, I'll say that, but
there's no way it's still the biggest if it's 16 years old, 17 years old.
A&M had to go bigger, I'm sure.
They've already put that video board like out on the lawn on the curb because they got a new one. And at this point, they're flat screens are so cheap now. You get a new one and you just set the old one out on the lawn. Somebody
Are they and A&M and Oklahoma all going to play each other every year, or at least Texas going to play A&M and Oklahoma every year going forward?
They put the schedule out. A&M and Texas are going to be playing, I believe, next year. Is that correct, Mark?
Yes.
So,
is there only one protected rival or two, or they haven't gotten that far yet, or
they have left us in the dark past 2024?
Yeah.
I think they're still having an internal battle and a battle with the networks or the network.
Yeah.
I'm
It's
looking
just
at the 4
ESPN.
stars. I'm looking at the 4 stars for 2020.
Hmm.
And yeah, there are some peaks, but man, you can go 10 or 12 consecutive players and see nothing but bus. CJ Stroud's at the top of the list, an enormous
Bust.
win. Hudson Card. Hudson Card's a good college quarterback
Watch your mouth.
playing at Purdue this year. And then you just have a long line of Jaquindon Jackson, Luke Doty, Harrison Bailey, Ethan Garbers, Haynes King, played a little bit at Texas A&M. Okay, Jay Butterfield, Shane Illingsworth, Evan Prater, Chuba Purdy, Malik Hornsby, all bus. Malik Hornsby is basically a wide receiver. Anthony Richardson, there you go. Even though he didn't do anything in college, he's an athletic freak. Tyler Van Dyke, one really good season or an 8 or 9 game stretch at Miami. Jury's still out. Jeff Sims gets the Nebraska job this year. We'll see. Drew Pine, he's been shipped off to Arizona State. Carson Beck, this is his time. Max Johnson had a nice season at LSU a couple of years ago, but that's it for him. And then another 10 or 12 or 13 just bombs. Nothing.
I'm on the Hudson Card train this year, by the way. So I think they can put up some numbers in the Graham Harrell offense. He can run, he can throw. So as long as he stays healthy, I think he can do some things. And they might have to be playing catch up quite a bit too. So that'll help.
Outside, I went all the way to number 50, and there's really no one who has succeeded in the 2020 class. West Virginia and Wake Forest current starting quarterbacks. Well, Garrett Green was last year. Mitch Griffiths at Wake takes over for Hartman, so the jury's still out. Oh, big exception, Will Rogers, Mississippi State, in the air raid system. May not be an NFL guy, but a prolific college quarterback. Guys, I am fascinated, even though this is down the list of priorities from a position unit standpoint, because I think whoever they throw out there is going to be fine. The offensive line is much more of a priority. The secondary, much more of a priority, and obviously the quarterback decision and development. But this running back situation, I am fascinated whether we're just going to get 70% Travion Henderson and 30% Mayan Williams, and that was the way it was supposed to be 2 years ago, and then for the next couple of years, or if these other guys that have shown us, Dallin Hayden in particular, who some people out there think is the best of the lot, will make a dent, and Ryan Day's not going to go with just seniority and past production, but what am I seeing in August, and who's the guy, and who's 2, and who's 3?
That's a great question. You didn't even mention Evan Pryor, who's coming back from injury, who will be kind of chomping at the bit to show what he can do as well. If I had to think about how they've handled things in the past and how they could handle this, I think Travion Henderson starts and plays the first 2 series. I think Mayan Williams comes in on the 3rd series as a changeup. I think when you're in short yardage or if you're at the goal line, they may go with Mayan Williams or Chip Trayanum, the bigger, more durable type back. I think they're going to throw the ball to Travion Henderson out of the backfield. And I think Dallin Hayden will do a little bit of everything as needed. So I think they're going to carve out niches for everybody. And I think they're going to get ahead of people by such margins that Dallin Hayden and Chip Trayanum will get some work in the second half of games, maybe 5-6 carries each. You won't need to play walk-on running backs at the end because you've got plenty of scholarship backs who can use those run-out-the-clock carries when you're not allowing Devin Brown to get throwing reps. Ryan Day, under penalty of death, does not want to throw the ball up 30 points. And so he didn't do it with Kyle McCord. And much to the consternation of the people on our message boards the last year or two, and probably won't do it with Devin Brown either. So if that's how it shakes out. And so I think those guys are going to get plenty of work. I think they're going to run the ball a little bit more on average or per capita than they did last year, just because you have a young quarterback and you don't want to overdo that and put that person in a position where they're going to fail. So I think it's going to be a mix. But to me, Travion Henderson, if he's healthy, he's a cut above. He's a special cat. So to me, I think he's got to play. And Mayan Williams, when he's healthy, is awesome. Just awe-inspiring the way he bounces off of people and doesn't take no for an answer and keeps falling forward and just rumbles through there. So he runs with authority. He runs mad. He runs angry. I think that's what the kids like to say. So that's fun to watch. Dallin Hayden is kind of a jack of all trades, can do a little bit of everything. And Chip Trayanum certainly earned his seat at the table as well with what he did at the end of last year when he was called upon. And certainly what we saw in spring practice was pretty good with him as well. I mean, they would soften up the defense and he'd go out there and just start, punishing people. So to me, you've got 4 really good ones, and there's no reason why you wouldn't come up with ways to utilize all 4 of them and make it work out. If I had to say, I would think Henderson will average 18 to 20 carries a game, Williams about 10, those other guys 5 or 6, and let it go from there.
Mark, you reminded me of one of my favorite stats, or Steve did, and that's from 2019 with Master Teague, who was 10th in the nation in rushing in the fourth quarter that year. He led the Big Ten in fourth quarter rushing, ahead of Jonathan Taylor, and averaged a yard more per carry in the fourth quarter than Jonathan Taylor. But that was his job. J.K. Dobbins would rush for 160 yards in the first 3 quarters, and then Master Teague would salt the game away. Yep. And that's what his job was. And he even rushed for more yards, I believe, in the second half than J.K. Dobbins did that year, because Teague was 15th nationally in second half yards in 2019, and J.K. Dobbins was 22nd. I'm going to assume J.K. Dobbins was like first or second in first half yards, but there are roles. Yeah, J.K. Dobbins first in first half yards by about 200 yards over Jonathan Taylor in 2019. But I'm thinking it's going to be like, if we're going to break this down by percentages, I wrote down like 38% for both Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams. So they'll take about 3/4 of the snaps, the carries, I think. And maybe we should talk about snaps instead, because I think Evan Pryor will have some snaps where he does not have carries because they're going to maybe move him around and use him in the slot a little bit. So he'll be on the field more, but he may not get the ball more. So I think that's one way to cheat a little bit and get a guy on the field and still you're out there, but the ball is going somewhere else. And not that it wouldn't by design go to him. It just depends on coverage and what the defense is doing. So that would be one way to kind of keep Evan Pryor a little bit happy. But I also do think there's going to be somebody, and maybe it's a couple of somebodies, who are going to get the ball in the fourth quarter when Ohio State is up by whatever, and they're looking to run the ball 12 times in their final 2 drives, and that gives somebody 5 carries, another guy 5 carries, and somebody else a couple of carries. And the good thing is 4 of these guys, and I won't throw Evan Pryor in there just yet, but they all have experience in clutch situations, big games. Dallin Hayden carried the team against Maryland last year. Chip Trayanum was the guy carrying the team against Michigan last year. So, and we all obviously know Travion Henderson and Mayan Williams are comfortable doing that. But I also do expect Evan Pryor to be involved pretty quickly with other things, maybe not just carrying the ball, but like I said, in the slot, just finding ways to use all of these weapons. And especially because you may be losing 3 of them after this season with, everybody, Mayan Williams and Travion Henderson leaving and Chip Trayanum being a senior, even though he could come back for another year or so. Get as many guys, get Evan Pryor some experience, because you don't want him leaving simply out of frustration. And now you've lost a bunch. Now they're bringing in 3 running backs at this point in the 2024 class. So that would help things if they do lose a bunch, but you also don't want to rely on a bunch of youngsters.
Yeah, Pryor, I think their hope and their thought was he would be full go, ready to go for the start of preseason camp. He was, not in a contact situation at all in the spring, so that was good to kind of continue his rehab, I think, and finish that process off. They didn't want to risk a setback for him, but I do believe Tony Alford was optimistic he would be ready to go for the start of preseason camp. And one other thought about the running game, I think you've got to devote at least 2 carries a game, I think, to Xavier Johnson and/or Emeka Egbuka at the wide receiver position, because those guys have the potential to house one if it's set up and blocked properly. Depending, if you're at the 40-yard line, they could take it in. But, I think that they've got the potential to rip off a 30, 40, 50-yarder if it's set up and blocked properly. And, they set all those things up with formations and tendencies and motion men and different things like that. And then, boom, they hit you with it. And it can be devastating. We've seen with Xavier Johnson and Emeka Egbuka taking a carry or 2 a game out of the backfield. So, or in motion or end around or however, reverse pitches or however you want to do it. But so I think that all factors into the run game as well. And of course, they always talk about how the quick screens are also considered part of the run game, because when the opponent puts 7 or 8 men in the box, the best answer is to take the snap and flip it out there and take your 4 or 5 yards, take your medicine, and take the 5 yards they're giving you and set up 2nd and 5 and go from there. 2nd and 5 can be a freewheeling down. So you can do anything in the playbook on 2nd and 5, 2nd and 4. So to me, as Jim Tressel once said, everything is part of everything. So that was one of his many Tresselisms. So I learned at the foot of Jim Tressel every day for 10 years. So forgive me if I've got a couple of those left in me somewhere.
I also think you need to include the strange and unfamiliar aspect of 2 to 5 carries a game from the quarterback now, as Kyle McCord will keep it. Devin Brown will certainly keep it, maybe a bit more than CJ Stroud, or the scrambling as well, especially if the offensive line is not as good as it needs to be. There may be quite a bit of scrambling involved there as well. But again, those are passes, so they're not necessarily coming out of their running back touches. But I do think there'll be some keeps on the read option.
This just in: Colorado defeated Notre Dame in the 1990 Orange Bowl.
So okay. Mike Pritchard game?
That was the Rocket game where he returned a punt for a touchdown with about 45 seconds left. They got called back.
Oh, yeah. A blatant, clear clip. And just because it happened behind the play, I still think you got to stick to the letter of the law. You've got to, if you don't, you'll have a lawless society. Those Colorado teams back then were awesome to watch, with like Darian Hagens and Eric Bieniemy, and the way they ran that offense. As I said, Mike Pritchard, and then Cordell Stewart comes on a little bit later. But back then, like that was some fun football with the way they would run their triple option, and the guys they had running it.
That was the golden age of Colorado football. It was went by in a flash, but that was that. They had about 6 or 8 years there.
It's coming back under prime. You had Rashawn Salam was in there too.
Yes. Their one Heisman Trophy winner, 1994. All right. Well, can any of these Ohio State running backs, to John's point, do what Donovan Edwards did to them? I guess if the play's blocked, I think a number of them can.
Yeah. If you got 10 guys on the line of scrimmage and you get past them, certainly.
How many of those Ohio State backs, Tony, can run straight for 75 yards?
Exactly. I mean, history, and I would post this every year from our old late buddy Jim Davidson, of the pictures that he would take of the Michigan game, where it would be Beanie Wells or Antonio Pittman or Ezekiel Elliott with a long run against Michigan, where you have the running back in the foreground and you've got like 6 Michigan defenders chasing him in the background. Like that was a tradition where Ohio State would always have this long run against the Michigan defense. And, Michigan has turned it around a little bit. Yes. But yeah, Ohio State still has that capability. I think Trevion Henderson is more than capable of busting a long one, and has done it in the past. But you know what? You got to block it and you got to do it. And they've not done it lately. And that obviously needs to change, and we'll see.
Folks, we've got an Amazon link in the description section of all the videos. If you grab the Amazon link, put it somewhere where you will not forget it, please use it. It's the same shopping experience for you. Doesn't cost you a penny, and helps build the channel and helps us keep going here. All right. Unless we've got any other comments or questions that come in or anything relevant to this week, we can send it off in this way. And for the folks that are on the line, about 125, keep in mind that you've missed the recruiting talk, the recent commits analysis, and so forth. So check out what you missed. As soon as we get done with the discussion here, the video automatically posts. Steve, if you could change one game from last year, what game would it be?
Oh, my word.
And then
God.
For some reason, Tony's finding this amusing.
I just about swore right there. I'll tell you what, that is one hell of a question.
Swearing's allowed, just not
because here's the thing: 95% of the rank and file, it's not even quite that number. It's probably about 75% of the rank and file still measure their self-worth on what Ohio State did against Michigan. And I think we need, this is not 1976 anymore, and Woody Hayes is no longer on the sideline. I think we have to kind of come, it's like everything else in the world. Things change, and sometimes not for the better. I mean, is college football a better place because Texas and Texas A&M and West Virginia and Pittsburgh and, all these other rivalries, Nebraska, Oklahoma, all went by the wayside? Hell no, it's not. It's not better because of that, and I'm not saying that it is. But in this day and age, beating Michigan, honestly, it's not just one other game, because it did decide the Big Ten, who was going to go to the championship game and everything else. But, man, you beat Georgia, you win the national championship. I think you beat TCU by 3 touchdowns, at least, based on, the TCU team that, no-showed the championship game. So, or you beat Michigan, who, you have a chance to beat Michigan, I guess, if Michigan gets through. I don't know. For the benefit of those 75% of the people, I'll say Michigan, but all that really changes is your seed, and you would have still played. No, you wouldn't have played Georgia. You would have played Michigan or TCU, I guess. I don't know. I guess you'd play TCU in the semifinals, and Michigan would play Georgia, I guess, would have been how it would have gone. But, man, I don't know. For the sanity of those 75% of the people, I'll say Michigan just to appease them. But, Tony, you take the proper angle on this one.
Yeah, the answer is the Georgia game, because for Ohio State fans, Michigan fans would be like, "How we beat you," and Ohio State fans could be like, I can't hear you over the noise of my national championship. Your little bickering is beneath me because I have hoisted this larger trophy. So that is the answer, I think, because if you beat Michigan and still lose to Georgia, you've stopped the streak, but your season has still ended with a loss to Georgia. I do wonder what maybe the better way to get an answer is, would you have rather beaten Georgia but then still lose to TCU? Like, which of those games would you change, knowing that if you change the Georgia game, you're still going to lose to TCU? Like, then it's like, well, then would you have rather beaten Michigan or Georgia? And the answer, I think, is Michigan, because the answer is always Michigan. Unless you're Michigan, then the answer is beat Georgia, as we know. But yeah, I think the answer is beat Georgia and then go claim your national championship. And then if Michigan fans want to claim a victory over you, then, congrats on their, national championship by proxy or something like that. Maybe Jim Harbaugh can get a trophy for something like that, or they can create something for their walls, a transitive national championship trophy for them.
I'm on record as saying a zillion times in the past, the Michigan game is more important than anything. It's even more important than winning national championships. That was my own personal, heartfelt 1976, to borrow from Steve, look at the world from the time I was 8 years old until very recently. I have flipped the page. Yes, you beat Georgia. If if you're given the choice, you win a national championship. And again, if we can't assume anything, then you are just playing in the national championship game against TCU. But we all saw what happened there. Yes, Steve. If we take off 5 touchdowns from Georgia, Ohio State still beats them by 3 touchdowns.
Well,
So,
06 and 16, they beat Michigan, and what'd they do with it? They did nothing with it. So it's like, there was something after Michigan in both of those years when you beat them. And those were important games, and you did nothing with them. So,
but my initial point's more about there's something emotional, visceral, based on this rivalry, that it doesn't matter if it's John Cooper's 4-6-1 1988 team. You want to win that game, and that's all that matters.
yeah.
So that's still that.
You don't
was
rub
in me
shoulders with Georgia people. You rub shoulders every day with Michigan people, and to have it
Yes.
rubbed in your face that 2 years in a row you've been run ruled by Michigan. I mean, that's not good. So, yeah.
But the answer is still Georgia. The answer, I believe, the answer is obviously personal to everyone, but Georgia, shoot, Ohio State's a national champion right now, and Michigan fans could brag all they want, and it would apply. I get it. Hey, we won the game and we won the Big Ten championship, but it would be a great debate piece all off season had Ohio State completed that. But that's the answer there. What's the answer all time if you can change one game?
We actually debated this, discussed it, I think, and somebody brought up Florida. The national championship game, had they nipped that one in the bud, found a way to win that one. 98 Michigan State, you would have won the very first BCS national championship, more than likely, because Florida State and Tennessee were dog crap that year. So, yeah.
Well, before Tony goes, that's part of the issue is, do you change a game that doesn't guarantee anything else? So if you beat Michigan State in 98, you can't guarantee that they're going to beat Tennessee. But
I watched Tennessee. They weren't very good.
Well, I understand that.
But you don't know how long their cleats were
know.
going to be. They could have come out with some 2-foot cleats, and they would have never slipped in it. And
Tennessee.
The most recent one for me is the Michigan State game in 15. Like, I would have loved to have seen that changed, but then you're talking about Ohio State's got to win 3 games that count. After that, they got to win a Big Ten championship game. They got to win 2 playoff games.
They were fat, happy, headed to the NFL. They didn't want it in 15.
Yeah.
They were between the administrators making them play a game on 5 days rest, the Virginia Tech to Hawaii debacle, to Urban. Now that they'd won it, referring to the next year as the grind or whatever. Why don't you just call it the freaking root canal or something? To not figuring out who the quarterback was, to playing Zeke when he was, 3 days removed from being in the hospital, to, those guys, they were all counting their NFL paychecks, the players. That year was doomed to failure. They never did look like the number 1 team in the country all season long. And it's sad because they had as much talent as any Ohio State team would ever have, I think.
And if they did look like the number 1 team, they would have really blown out Notre Dame in the bowl game instead of just sort of blowing them out. But I always get this annoyance level that I have for the admiration that the 2015 team gets, because I'm with you, Steve. They were still celebrating their national championship from the year before, and they were never going to win another one. Like,
they were going through the motions.
Yeah. So for me,
so I got to do this until I get drafted in 4 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
the admiration's for the talent.
Yes.
That's the admiration and what could have been. That's the fascination.
No, and I get that, and all of the talent that they have. It's a shame that they should have won with that talent. I think maybe the Lightning left the bottle in terms of the quarterback situation. Cardale Jones was not the guy at that point anymore. That I think maybe the secret was out, but it was just a very disjointed and also a terrible offensive coordinator in Ed Warner. Let's not forget that. There are a lot of reasons why things were bad, went south that year. But for me, I'm going to go 1998, the Michigan State game, because that was my senior year. Like, we had plans. We had tickets for every game. We were going to every game. That was national championship year. You know, it was a done deal. And I know you can't say it would have guaranteed a national championship, Mark. I'm telling you now, because there's no way to disprove it, it was going to guarantee a national championship. And that game was just devastating. And it remains devastating personally to anybody that was in the stadium there, sitting in the stands, except for maybe those 2,500 Michigan State fans that certainly weren't expecting what they saw that day. I think I still have this little theory that job saved Nick Saban's career at Michigan State.
Got him the or whatever. What was next? LSU. Got him
LSU. The year after they went. He had a good year the year after, I think, at Michigan State, and then went to LSU. But they lose that one. They're like 500, and at this point, do they move on from him or what? So it's a fun little thing that I like to think about every now and again, but not too much, because obviously it brings up the pain of the 98 game and sitting there and swallowing the Iowa ticket that I had for the next week, because we weren't going to drive all the way out there for that team anymore.
My devastation from the 98 Michigan State game was interrupted by a 1.5-year-old tugging at my pant leg who didn't care who won that game. And so I was quickly diverted to, okay, this is actually important here.
Mm-hmm.
But then, then the depression set back in, after that. He went to bed and then it came back. So it was interrupted there momentarily. But I'm going to play this to the letter of the law and not assume results past it and say, the most recent championship game is, of course, 2020. But I think because Ohio State only played 5 regular season games, people would diminish that, even though technically it's the same. They would be the 2020 national champions had they beaten Alabama. I'm going to go to 2007. The game that people don't really consider because they lost by 2 touchdowns. LSU was far better, but we have no stipulation on how close the game was. And I'm going to say I'm going to raise that above the Florida game because it's more recent by 1 year. Unless you want to play the cause and effect that if they beat Florida, maybe they win in 2007 as well.
Yeah, it would be. I like the one on the screen there too. Ohio State, Michigan, 1969 with Rex Kern. I mean, they would have, had 2 unbeaten seasons in a row. I don't know. There's so many of them. You could spend a day talking about it, no doubt. But yeah, Florida to me was the beginning of the end of the Tressel era, I think. And, however it ended up. I mean, we talked about this. Had he won that game, I don't think you're getting him out of that job under any circumstances. He would have had the cachet to fend off, the NCAA, 10 NCAAs, 10 Gordon Gees, 10 Les Wexners, or whoever got him out of that job. So, yeah.
And since I missed the Woody era and Earl was my first favorite coach, if they beat USC in the 1980 Rose Bowl, then he wins a national championship, and so does Ohio State after all those 1970s disappointments.
Mm-hmm. I may have to change my answer to the 2019 Clemson game just because Ohio State should have won that game, but also because I still think that the game against LSU would have been incredible with Ohio State's defense against LSU's offense. And Ohio State, don't forget, their offense was also awesome, and LSU's defense they relied on their offense a lot. So I think you could have been looking at an all-time great college football game that would have been wild, and you would have seen, like a 52-49 type of thing, and it would have been incredible. And I think we missed out because a replay official buzzed down because he wanted to be part of the game because maybe his mother was watching on television, and he just wanted to, be noticed because obviously he lives a miserable life at home. Wife doesn't care about him. He was just somebody out there needs to know I'm here, and that's what he did. And so that, then he probably got a text from his mother saying, good job.
It damn near killed Sue. Sue, we are glad you're still with us. And Darren is asking.
That's a good question. I would say Iowa and Purdue back to back. The Purdue game in 2018 and Iowa in 2017, but that's it. Those two games are the only games that Ohio State lost.
I don't even include those two. If they play those games over the next day, Ohio State wins. We got to go back to like the Cooper years. Ohio State hasn't lost a game in at least 35 years.
The game at USC maybe in 2008.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go, Darren. 2008, Ohio State's got a 13-year winning streak, 15-year winning streak. And the 35-3 game, although I guess if we reviewed that game, we could figure out how Ohio State was gypped out of 5 touchdowns. We could do that. All right. Appreciate everybody being here. Buckeyes Live. We got Tony Gerdeman here. You got to check him out on BuckeyeHuddle.com. Buckeye Weekly. Tony, what do you have working this week?
I just posted a story about Jim Null talking about how he thinks this defense can be the best in the nation. So did that. Dropped a Buckeye Weekly episode yesterday talking about just some random questions about the Buckeyes, and also if we were an assistant coach at Ohio State, thinking through all of the recruiting days of lore, was there a recruit that Ohio State missed on that we would have subtweeted? And what that tweet would have been, and what coach we would have been, and who that recruit would have been. So just some fun stuff like that in yesterday's show. So you can find that wherever podcasts are sold.
And yes, Darren, Ohio State should have won the 1990 Liberty Bowl over Air Force. They shouldn't have let that happen either. Okay. Steve?
We're just staying on top of all this football recruiting. I mean, with guys who visited the last few weeks, there are some decisions impending, and I think there's going to be a few booms that go up, not just the July 4th fireworks, but a few guys probably in the next few weeks on that defensive side of the ball in particular that are going to make that decision to join Ohio State's 2024 class. So that's one thing. I also went to a great high school basketball event up in Sandusky over the weekend and saw over 120 teams and all kinds of great players, and writing all about that right now as well. So any of the few of you that are basketball people can enjoy that coverage as well.
All right. Thanks, Tony, for making this happen. Steve, thank you as well. Steve has done a fine job as well. We appreciate him. I came across, I don't know how this happened. I was researching something. I came across our show number one. I didn't suffer through it. I didn't watch more than about 12 seconds, but I just came across it because I was searching through the channel for a topic. And show number one, both of you guys were right there. And
it's a library of stuff, I have to say. It's something.
it's a part of YouTube history. Yes. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. Next Wednesday, most likely, but you got to turn on those notifications to know when we present our next live show. Thanks, guys.
Yep.